Hi, I'm Carol Forsyth, and this is Jonathan Steinberg, and we're going to talk about Are You Really a Team Player? Profiling collaborative problem solvers in an online environment. Jessica Andrews Todd is also our collaborator, but she's unable to be here today. So here's an overview of what we're going to talk about. A little bit about CPS and assessment, then the in-task assessment framework, followed by the task, research questions, methods, analyses, and conclusions. So as everyone knows, I don't think we really have to sell this right now. Times have changed where we're more in a type of age where technical skills and interacting with people online and in teams has become more and more important. And along with that, especially collaborative problem solving has become important to employers and for students to learn. Which brings us to the issue of collaborative problem solving and assessment. We know it's a critical skill for the 21st century workforce, and especially now, but there's always been a little bit of issue as far as trying to actually assess the construct, even though increased attention has been paid to it. So our main focus has been to conceptualize this construct, design environments that provide opportunities to display CPS skills, determine methods for making inferences about individual CPS skills, and just acknowledge no easy solutions are given for the complexity of CPS. So here's a little more on our solution. We use the ITAF framework, which is the in-task assessment framework. It's the extension of evidence-centered design, which was created by Bob Mislevy. It's very much like a top-down, bottom-up approach. What we're trying to do is define the construct, outline the relationship between the construct's associated skills, strategies, and tactics in an ontology before we start looking at features for analysis. This method has proved fruitful, and on some of our previous work, we showed in EDM 2018. So what are these constructs of collaborative problem solving we're looking at? These come in two separate dimensions. There's a social dimension, and there's also a cognitive dimension. And in the social dimension, there's some overarching skills like maintaining communication, sharing information with whom you're working with, negotiating, establishing a shared understanding. I'm not going to go too in depth on each of these for time's sake, but feel free to ask me questions afterwards. We also have the cognitive dimension. These, I'm thinking this audience might be pretty familiar with, exploring and understanding, representing and formulating the problem, planning for a solution, executing that solution, and monitoring the progress along the way. So we have here a total of 9 skills. These are mostly measured by discourse in our current environment, but also in actions. By 2 of them have actions. This is what these skills would look like once they're mapped out entirely on a CPS ontology. And this is not nearly the entire ontology. This is more a matter of just showing that we do have overarching skills, then we get to these strategies and tactics, all the way down to lower level features and how they're displayed. Is it chat? Is it an action? What chat? What action? All of this is laid out a priori. I'm not expecting you to be able to read this, it's just a snippet. So where was it implemented? We implemented this in the 3-resistor activity developed by Concord and Cord. And this is an electronics environment problem. It's a series circuit problem where 3 separate team members work together to be able to solve the problem. There are multiple components to the interface, but the main point is that the students are actually required to talk to each other to solve the problem. There are 4 levels that students proceed to. They can only proceed to the next level after successfully solving the earlier level. And as they progress amongst these levels, the task itself becomes more complicated because less information is given. And with that complexity, it requires team members to talk to each other more and more. So, what do we know about applying analyses and understanding collaborative problem solvers in this environment and our current research questions and methods? Here's some of what we already know. These CPS skills that were identified in the framework are exhibited by students, And we have found profiles that seem meaningful, that have emerged and correlated with performance and expected directions in a previous EDM paper. What do we need to know? Will meaningful profiles exist with a larger and more diverse sample? And will these profiles correlate with performance? Will these profiles correlate with the newly developed CPS inventory at the individual and team levels? Will they replicate with a different sample? So our main research questions, to reiterate, are: can we create meaningful profiles? And how do these profiles relate to external measures? We had a very different sample than in our last analysis at EDM, where it was much more diverse, with students from engineering, physics, and electronics, not only at community college, which is how it was in the past, but also universities. And we also have 378 participants. This is about triple our sample size from our last EDM paper. And in our procedure, students answered a pre-survey with demographics information, and also answered an assessment that we created on electronics knowledge. Students interacted with the online simulation, requiring them to solve the problem. And then they completed a post-survey about their collaborative experience, both on the individual and team level. A lot of chat data resulted from this task. So the CPS ontology was used to define the features and develop rubrics to be able to, for us to score the chat. Qualitative coding was used to choose which chat we were going to be scoring, and it was coded as over 51,800 something units of analysis. And the inter-rater reliability was pretty good, with kappa of 0.93. And we were able to see pretty diverse skill frequencies for each participant. We then used a clustering analysis to look at CPS skill frequencies, which I'll talk about momentarily. The electronics tests, to let you guys know about these, we had developed and validated, and Jonathan on here has a lot of information on this and has published a paper about our electronics tests. And we also developed a CPS inventory, including self and other ratings on social and cognitive dimensions. So how do we actually conduct the analyses now that we have our features from the chat and you've seen the external measures? We used a hierarchical clustering approach based on the frequencies of the chat of the students. It comes down really to just 11 skills that were displayed. That's the 9 earlier on the social and cognitive, and 2 of those were measured in chat and action. So those were included as separate skills. We started at a finer grain level from the ontology, but it just made more sense in the end to collapse the 11 for many different reasons. We employed the word method. It was chosen because we could compare the numbers not only on just fit, but we can actually look back. Does this match to social, cognitive, communication theory? That's a main point of our entire project here, is to keep that tight-knit relationship between the quantitative and the theoretical halves to make sure that everything we find does have meaningful implications based on existing theory. And then after determining the clusters, we then evaluated the clusters on performance and self-ratings of collaboration and on the electronics tests. So here are our profiles: social loafers, active collaborators, super socials, and low collaborators. The social loafers, these guys, they displayed less than average skills on almost all the CPS skills that we identified. This can be explained as the people that kind of sit back and go, okay, you guys take the lead. I'm just going to kind of sit here and let these other more active team members solve the problem. This is consistent with previous findings as well. Then we had our active collaborators. It's a small number. It was only about 24. They had higher than average on every skill except for maintaining communication, which was mostly off-topic information. And these types of CPS skills align with other people's research as well as our own. Once again, consistent with previous findings. Then we had the super socials, who displayed high frequencies of the social dimensions of CPS, but lower cognitive. And they actually even showed the highest relative values for negotiating, which is a sparse skill, but it was an interesting finding. So these students are very adept at communication, but not entirely lacking in the cognitive aspects, but they are not quite obtaining the level of cognitive interactions for CPS as those that would be considered active collaborators. Then we have the low collaborators. These guys had negative standardized values on most CPS skills, but they were doing a lot of actions. They just were working alone. They were not really communicating with the rest of the group, but were attempting to solve the problem. So we took these 4 profiles and we decided to look at external validation with our external measures. And here's the trends that we found. And looking at the mean ranks of the profiles to performance, we ended with social loafers having by far the lowest, but active collaborators had the greatest relationship and highest mean rank to performance across the task as expected. Then we compared the profiles to the electronics external tests. And there's significant main effect, of course. And again, this is very much expected. The active collaborators, they did have the higher prior knowledge on the electronics test. So did the super socials. So remember, displayed cognitive skills. Super socials significantly different from social loafers, and low collaborators had lower knowledge on electronics tests, which could be why they were keeping to themselves. Then we look at the CPS self-inventory and profiles. This is for individuals. Again, significant main effect. Super socials, significantly different from the low collaborators. Super socials, high CPS self-ratings, as expected. CPS inventory for the team, same trend again. So for results and conclusions, profiles were discovered that partially replicated our previous results. Correlations in expected directions, and potential reasons for the variation is likely the sample size and diversity of sample. The methodology appears to be working and can indeed identify features a priori. Our work substantiates that this theoretically grounded data mining approach may be identifying important CPS features, and the profiles were discovered on the large and diverse sample. We want to acknowledge NSF and also Jackson, the latest member to our group, Jessica's new baby.